Let's just get right into it. Trillions, literally trillions of dollars in institutional wealth are currently sitting on digital infrastructure that is, well, fundamentally fragile and easily altered. Today, in this explainer of the source material, we're unpacking a massive fiduciary challenge highlighted in the IDOS documentation, the unseen, deeply embedded risks lurking inside institutional data custody. We're going to look at exactly how the internal playbooks argue fiduciaries, managing trustees, and chief risk officers can absolutely eliminate personal liability from evidence spoliation. And spoiler alert, we're talking about doing this using a completely localized, mathematically deterministic architecture. So think about this for a second. If an underwriter demanded ironclad proof of exactly how an asset was structured 3 years ago, how many weeks would it take your team to produce an airtight audit? We're starting right out of the gate with this diagnostic question straight from the internal playbooks because it perfectly highlights a massive liability: evidence spoliation. Basically, that's just the legal term for the risk of records being silently overwritten, destroyed, or altered. If a system admin can tweak a record in your database without leaving an immutable trace, your institution is exposed right now. In the event of a multi-jurisdictional audit or, say, a hostile beneficiary dispute, how long does it take your treasury team to dig through static PDFs, disconnected email threads, and clunky legacy databases? This question exposes your vulnerability to what the documents call audit drag, and it reveals exactly how much trustee surcharge risk an organization is just carrying around every single day. It all comes down to a really stark contrast between traditional cloud databases and this new cryptographic architecture. Think about your legacy reality for a moment. If you're relying on standard SQL servers or normal cloud storage, those event logs are inherently mutable. They just are. A superadmin can go in, tweak a timestamp, and literally rewrite history. To combat that, the IDOS engine is built to be an impenetrable digital vault. According to the architecture documentation, it uses deterministic mathematics to guarantee that records simply cannot be altered once they're logged. No exceptions. The whole point is to move your operations out of systems that require constant, fragile human trust and into an environment that relies on absolute, unshakable mathematical certainty. Now, you might be wondering, and it's usually the first objection in the corporate world, wait, isn't this just crypto? Well, the source documents draw a very hard line here. They explicitly reject both the fragility of standard SQL servers and the speculative chaos of Web3. To put it simply, corporate fiduciaries need courtroom-ready certainty. You don't need speculative token abstractions, public ledgers, or volatile gas fees, right? The focus here isn't on trading coins at all. It is strictly on using applied cryptography to mathematically lock down your exclusive data custody. It takes the underlying math that makes digital scarcity possible, strips away all the public noise, and applies it directly and securely to enterprise operations. Okay, so how does this actually work in the real world? We've got to look at the legal framework, specifically UCC Article 12. This is what grounds these high-tech concepts strictly in commercial law. It introduces something called a controllable electronic record, or a CER, which gives this technology its real-world teeth. By processing legal agreements through this engine, the playbook notes that you aren't just making a highly secure digital backup, you are actually achieving statutory perfection by control under the Uniform Commercial Code. And in everyday terms, statutory perfection just means the law definitively recognizes that whoever mathematically holds the digital keys undeniably owns the asset, period. It takes standard corporate paper and literally transforms it into an unassailable, legally recognized digital asset. Of course, the sheer terror for any institutional leader is the dreaded 8-month IT migration project, right? The one that might completely wreck your existing ERP or accounting software. Well, the documentation points out that the IDOS architecture bypasses that nightmare entirely. It functions as a passive integrity wrapper. It operates on premises and is completely air-gapped, meaning it's physically isolated and disconnected from vulnerable outside networks. As your data just naturally moves through your legacy systems, this engine runs right alongside it, calculating these things called SHA 256 state roots. You can think of a state root as a unique, mathematically perfect digital fingerprint of your data at an exact millisecond in time. And because it does this passively, the playbook argues you get absolute data integrity with zero disruption to your current workflow and zero exposure to third-party cloud risks. So procedurally, how does this all come together? The architecture takes static legal reality and passes it through a deeply structured workflow to build a bulletproof digital representation. It all starts with one foundational rule: legal reality precedes representation. The real-world contract absolutely must exist first. From there, it flows into the event ledger, This acts as an append-only log. So new data can be added, sure, but old data, it can never, ever be erased or altered. Finally, the system uses a dynamic rights graph. Instead of just flatly marking an asset as owned, the documents explain that this graph splits ownership into 4 distinct vectors: economic, control, information, and temporal rights. This is huge because it gives institutions incredibly granular authority. You can cleanly separate, for example, the party who actually gets paid from the party who has the right to make administrative decisions. Looking at the internal battle cards, it's clear this technological shift is not pitched as just some generic IT upgrade. Far from it, it's meticulously tailored to act as a direct cure for the very specific financial and legal headaches of different C-suite leaders. The sales enablement documentation outlines a highly structured strategy here. It positions these cryptographic tools not as some abstract future concept, but as the exact, immediate medicine for the operational friction that is literally keeping modern executives up at night. The source material actually maps these localized solutions directly to specialized fiduciary risks. Let's break it down. For the chief financial officer, the biggest pain is usually slow balance sheet velocity and escalating audit costs. The solution? Instant verification that frees up trapped capital. For the general counsel or chief legal officer, it's all about mitigating lawsuit exposure, so the system delivers statutory perfection under commercial law. And for the chief risk officer, who is constantly worried about assets being double-pledged, the goal is eliminating counterparty risk entirely by keeping the data strictly in-house with zero third-party custody. The whole playbook is designed so that every single stakeholder at the table gets a mathematically proven shield that's custom-tailored to their specific liabilities. To really drive this home, the playbooks instruct representatives to measure a treasury's exact exposure to these risks using really practical diagnostic parameters. They might ask you about costly notary delays, or pressure test whether your current ERP can actually produce verifiable proof of control on demand. These diagnostics precisely expose the glaring gap between a company's legacy infrastructure and true UCC Article 12 compliance. It really forces an institution to take a hard look at their current liquidity bottlenecks and realize, wow, our legacy systems simply cannot keep up with modern evidentiary standards. And that brings us to a very important number, 200. This single number represents the 200 milliseconds, yes, milliseconds, it takes for the internal engine to run what the playbooks call a rewind and verify historical audit. Just imagine being subpoenaed for a full 5-year accounting of an asset's entire life cycle. The documentation claims that instead of weeks of grueling manual labor, an authorized user can literally press a key and generate a cryptographic verification package, accurate down to the exact millisecond. It completely replaces an army of forensic accountants with an instantaneous, flawless mathematical proof. That extreme speed, combined with an unalterable architecture, directly targets the incredibly strict standards of the Federal Rules of Evidence, specifically Rules 90213 and 90214. These are the rules governing self-authenticating digital records in a courtroom. The documentation actually outlines a fascinating strategy for representatives here. The playbook suggests taking your actual promissory note or debt paper, running it through the offline hashing engine right in front of you, and demonstrating in real time exactly how that standard piece of paper transforms into an indisputable, self-authenticating, controllable electronic record. It's a real game changer to see in action. From a purely financial perspective, the documents contrast the massive, painful expense of traditional audits against this instant verification. If a traditional multi-jurisdictional audit requires retaining third-party forensic CPAs at, say, $25,000 a pop, the financial drain on your institution is heavy, and it's continuous. But by utilizing this passive integrity wrapper, the playbook argues an institution drops that marginal verification cost, essentially to zero. The ROI presented here is pretty undeniable. The software pays for itself the exact moment that first subpoena or complex audit hits your desk. Ultimately, the source documents suggest that commercial reality is shifting incredibly fast, leaving fiduciaries with a stark, binary choice. Do you continue relying on easily altered legacy systems that carry immense, unseen personal liability? Or do you adopt the legally binding architecture recognized by UCC Article 12? The playbooks make a compelling case that the exact tools required to mathematically secure your fiduciary reality exist right now. The only question left is, are modern institutions prepared to implement them before the next audit demands absolute proof?